There are very few people in the world, Elon, Barack, Taylor, who are known widely by just their first name. And of course, Bibi, former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, is one of them. It's a pleasure to welcome the Prime Minister on the advent of the publication of his new memoir, Bibi, My Story, to the AJU platform. Prime Minister, I know you've had a very busy day campaigning. Welcome. We're delighted that you're here with us.
Thank you. Delighted to be here with you.
Some of the most interesting parts of your book to me were the ideas that you identified as being inherited from your father, Benjamin Netanyahu, himself a distinguished historian of Spain, of the Spanish Inquisition, and an important associate of Jabotinsky in the United States in the 1940s. You write that your father, and you believe you succeeded because you understood that to succeed it was important to, quote, influence governments through public opinion, influence public opinion by appealing to justice, influence leaders by appealing to interests. How has that informed your career, and how does that differentiate you from others in diplomatic practice?
Well, the first thing you have to understand is that the weak don't survive. We have to understand that. The weak get devoured by aggressive nations. I don't think I'm saying something that's not obvious to everyone in the world today, but it may not have been obvious a few years ago. In the Middle East in particular, the weak don't survive. Iran is trying to acquire nuclear weapons, and in the meantime, to devour the weak. So if Israel is weak, Israel won't survive. If Israel is weak, Israel will not be able to make peace, because you don't make peace with the weak, you make peace with the strong. So that, for me, was, I would say, brought home by my father's understanding that the Jewish people were very, very weak before they had a state. When my father was 23 years old, in 1933, and the year that Hitler rose to power, he foresaw the Holocaust. He wrote about it and said that Hitlerism would consume the Jewish people, would destroy them everywhere in the world, and that this annihilation threatened not only us, but all of humanity. And he therefore said that we have to get all of humanity to combat with us the threat of Hitlerism. That wasn't done in time. And we paid a horrible price with the loss of European Jewry and a third of our people. My father saw the Jewish state as the instrument of protecting us, making us strong, so we wouldn't eliminate anti-Semitism. It's been around for thousands of years, but we would protect ourselves against those who seek to destroy us. For Israel to be strong, it had to be strong militarily. To be strong militarily, it had to be strong economically. I had to lead a free market revolution to make it so. And to make it strong, once you made it strong militarily and economically, you also made it strong diplomatically. And we got the 4 peace treaties with the Arab states because of Israel's strength, because of their common interests of the leaders to protect their countries against Iran. But there is one strength that you allude to, that my father spoke about. And he said, it's the strength of public opinion. And when we appeal to non-democratic countries, you don't need public opinion, because there is no public opinion. Because in most of these countries, the leaders make the decisions. They base it on the interests as they see it. You appeal to them on interests. That's true also of many democracies. You can appeal to leaders on the basis of national interests. But leaders in democracies are guided also by public opinion, because they have to get elected. They don't want to get diselected. So if you win public opinion, you'll win the leaders as well. You appeal to public opinion, and there's only one way to appeal to public opinion. It is to say, my cause is just, my opponent's cause is unjust. It doesn't make any difference if you're the most moral country in the world. You can be the most moral country in the world, but if your opponent is able to describe themselves as just and you as unjust, they'll beat you. That was the case of Israel. Time and again, we won on the military battlefield and lost on the political battlefield because we didn't appeal to public opinion properly. I devoted my life not only to the iron triangle of peace, strengthening Israel militarily, economically, diplomatically, but also fighting in the public opinion court that mattered most in the United States. And I think we'll continue to have to fight that war. We know that our enemies haven't been eliminated. The lies and slanders leveled against us haven't been eliminated. If you want to win the military battle, you have to win the public opinion battle. To win the public opinion battle, you have to win the argument of who is just. This is something that shouldn't be too hard for us because we are just, because we are in the right, because our history is being distorted, and because our rights are being ignored. I stand up for these rights. I learned that from my father, and this long answer to a short question will not be repeated. I'll try to cut it much more.
Prime Minister, let me segue to a particular aspect of public opinion, Israel's relationship with the diaspora. American Jews overwhelmingly identify with Israel, and its strength is a point of pride, but it's a complicated love affair. And as you know, many American Jews in particular are concerned about an increasing Haredi population in Israel who practice a religion which is not familiar in many ways to American Jews, and who seem to have a complicated attitude to the Israeli state. What I want to ask you in particular is, in 2016, there was an agreement on the Kotel, the Western Wall Agreement, to establish an egalitarian section at the Kotel. That agreement was not carried out. And since then, we've witnessed, in particular, women and girls harassed as they try to pray. And that's been a point of contention, and I think a point of division between American Jews and Israel. How do we understand, how do you understand that relationship, what's happened at the Kotel, and the bigger picture of populations which may not understand each other as well as they used to?
Well, I brought a suggestion for a compromise. It was blocked in the Jerusalem municipality. It's politics. If you don't have that in America, and you have perfection in American politics, and everything is harmonious, let me know. I'll try to follow the model. That's not the case. Israel is a democratic country. It's a country with various groups, divergent people, divergent views, and you make compromises. And if making that compromise is seen as a great aberration, what has Israel done? It's against Jewish freedom. It's against, that's ridiculous. Come on. It's the only place in the world where Jews can practice their faith, perhaps not as freely as some would like, but they're able to do so. But yes, is it a perfect harmony? The answer is no. Now the question about the Haredim in Israel, well, there has been an enormous change. Something has happened, and that people are not aware of. Because of reforms that I made, which were very hard to do, and I described them in my book, the reforms, pre-market reforms, they included a drastic cutback in child allowances. And the ones that suffered most were the Haredim and the Arabs, because they have a lot of children. The reason they also had a lot more children was because it paid to have a lot more children. For the first few kids, you got a certain amount of money, and then per kid, it went up as the number of children went up. So you could have a Bedouin family in the Negev, because they have, unfortunately, although it's illegal, multiple wives. They could have 50, 60 children. They drive a BMW Jeep as their second car, okay? Living off of welfare, child allowances. The same thing was true, not quite the same thing, because there are no multiple marriages in the Haredi community. But again, it was a way that you could sustain yourself by virtue of having a lot of children that received from the sixth child on an enormous amount of money. I cut that down to the level of the first child. It cost me a great deal. A lot of these reforms were like a surgeon coming to an operating room with a sick patient, and you have to tuck and and cut and sew. It was very difficult, and I paid dearly for that politically. But the country's economy was resuscitated from the worst economic crisis in years, and it soared. And Israel has become, with these reforms, a very, very wealthy country. We've just passed Germany in GDP per capita. We're going to catch up with the United States soon. And I expect some of you will come to Israel to better your economic life and better your position. I'm not kidding. It's happening. So that required a change. And the change vis-a-vis the Haredi community and the Arab community was startling. Number one, the Arab and Jewish birth rates. This wasn't my goal, but this was a result. Arab and Jewish birth rates, the Jews actually, there are more Jews being born per woman than there are Arabs being born per woman in Israel. Nobody knows that. So that stabilized the demography that keeps Israel a Jewish and democratic country because of this change. The second thing that happened is that the Haredim began to work. And they began to work. The Haredi women right now work as much as the average population, unheard of a few years ago. And the Haredi men are trailing them, but they're going up too. They're discovering that they could actually earn more money getting jobs in Israel's prosperous economy than staying at home. So I'm more sanguine about the future. I think there are changes. There's modernization that takes place. And I'm not worried in that sense about Israel's future. If there's something that worries me about Israel's future, well, three things in the top three. Iran, Iran, Iran. Because Iran is seeking to overtly destroy us, and Iran is seeking to develop nuclear weapons to carry out that mission. That is what occupies me.
Let me ask you about Iran, Prime Minister. You were, of course, very outspoken in your opposition to the JCPOA, the Iran deal, which now seems moribund, as well as combating Iran's destabilization of the region and have pointed out its human rights violations internally. Do you believe that the ambition of policy towards Iran should be regime change?
Yeah, of course. I say it openly. Of course, you have a regime that wants a genocidal regime that wants to wipe us off the face of the earth. And do I want that regime changed? Yes, yes, and yes. What a question. But I think we have to do two things. We have to strive for that and let the brave men and the brave women, the extraordinarily brave women of Iran, win the day, obviously. But equally, we have to make sure that the Ayatollahs do not have nuclear weapons. And we have to block that. Because with or without an agreement, it's meaningless. They cheat, they lie. I describe in my book how I sent the Mossad for a secret raid on Iran's secret atomic archive in Tehran. Did you see the movie Argo? You saw it. This was Argo on multiple steroids, because our guys got to the secret safes, bust them open, took half a ton of disks and files. And the Iranian security forces were chasing them in Tehran, and they finally got out with all the material. Heroes of Israel, really heroes. And we could see that they were cheating. These files revealed 3 secret sites that the International Atomic Energy Agency is asking to investigate. Iran refuses. That's one of the things that held up the agreement before the protests, the action that we took. So Iran lies, it cheats, it doesn't make any difference. If with or without an agreement, the only way to stop Iran is with a combination of crippling sanctions, the threat of credible military action, and if the threat doesn't work, credible military action. If people say, oh, that leads to a war, well, no, it isn't. It's not going to lead to it. It may or may not. But if you don't have it, you're going to face Iran with nuclear weapons. That is a far worse danger and a war that is unimaginable in its tragic consequences.
Prime Minister, you just kindly came from a rally as part of the run-up to what will be Israel's 5th election in a little more than 3 years on November 1st. It's a complicated election, and you say in the book that it kind of requires advanced game theory to understand how to make your strategy. Before we talk further about the election, maybe you could talk about how you perceive the Israeli electorate's changed over the time that you've been running for office.
Well, unquestionably, it's moved to the right, to a more conservative position, but it's done so in a reasoned way. Why? Because we were being told all the time that the core problem of the Middle East is the Palestinian problem, that the way to solve the Palestinian problem is for Israel to retreat to basically to the indefensible 67 lines, to divide Jerusalem, and so on. And that was the idea that would also solve our internal problem. Successive governments followed that line. And what happened was that the areas that we vacated, far from bringing us peace, brought us terror. It happened in Gaza in a big way, and it's become a stronghold for Iran, essentially, to fire 10,000 rockets into Israel. It happened when we vacated South Lebanon. Hezbollah came in, again, Iran came in, and they fired thousands of rockets into Israel. So we weren't getting territory for peace, we were getting territory for terror. We were giving territory and getting terror in response. But nevertheless, people said, well, you got to solve the problem with the Palestinians in Judea, Samaria, and the West Bank. You've got to retreat there. You've got to take the risk. Every time we tried anything, what we saw is that the Islamists, Hamas, came in. And we knew that the only way that we can make peace with the Palestinians is if there is a reversal, a change in Palestinian society. And the problem with Palestinian society, with the Palestinian politics, is they don't want peace with Israel. They want peace without Israel. They want a state not next to Israel. They want a state instead of Israel. And when I say this, this is at a time when real changes were taking place in the Arab world. And I could see those changes. So when people said to me, and I describe how my friend with whom I disagree, John Kerry, said to me, there is no way that you can make peace with Arab states unless you first solve the Palestinian problem. I said, well, John, there's no way I can make peace with them if I wait for the Palestinians, because I'll wait another quarter of a century. Since our peace treaty with Egypt and Jordan, it took a quarter of a century, we had no peace, because everybody was saying, you got to first have peace with the Palestinians. I took a different route. And the Arab leaders took a different route. When they saw that Israel was so strong, getting stronger because of free market economy and the innovation nation that sprang up, when they saw in 2015, again, I described this in great detail. In 2015, I went to Congress to challenge a sitting president, which was very difficult for me because America is our indispensable ally. But I thought the nuclear agreement would pave Iran's path with gold, with billions, hundreds of billions of dollars to a nuclear arsenal. So I had to challenge it because my country's existence was on the line. Israel's existence was on the line. And when I went there, while I was speaking to Congress, we got phone calls from Gulf leaders. And they said, we cannot believe what we're seeing here. We cannot believe how your prime minister is standing up to, let's face it, the most powerful man on earth. And we want meetings. That spawned the direct meetings in the Gulf, in the Red Sea on a yacht, landing by helicopter with these Arab leaders. These secret meetings laid the foundation for what later became the Abraham Accords. It was Israel's strength that attracted them. And they couldn't care less, frankly, about the Palestinian problem that the entire world, the West, the experts in Washington, and for that matter elsewhere, were telling them you have to go through the Palestinians. No, they wanted their interest. They wanted their country's interests served. They wanted their security, their economy, their health, their medicine, their energy requirements, and other things. And so we made peace with them and went around this. I think that my approach to the Palestinian issue is actually the opposite. Everybody said you have to work inside out. I say we work outside in. We'll end the Arab-Israeli conflict, and then we'll isolate Palestinian rejectionism. And I think we could get what I believe will be a reasonable solution with which Israel can live with which Israel can live and not die.
Minister, there are very few countries that have this many general elections in such a short period of time. What do you think that says about the state of Israeli democracy? And is there a way of getting out of what seems to be just rapid fire elections?
Yeah, well, it's a lousy electoral system. Proportional representation is probably the most unstable electoral system that you can have because any few percent can make a party. And so you have fragmentation. There are ways to solve this. One is the American system, which is very good. You have your criticism of it, but I think it's probably the best in the world out of imperfect systems, obviously. The other one is what other countries do. They give the largest party a bonus of a few seats, sometimes a lot of seats, so it can govern. Or conversely, you can have an arrangement where the two largest parties in proportional representation compete with each other afterwards on a head-to-head of the leaders, and whoever wins becomes the prime minister, and the party gets additional bonuses. There are ways to solve this problem. It's not going to be easy because the Knesset members the cats don't want to give up the cream, and they're pretty happy with the system they have, but the country is unhappy. What does it say about the state of Israeli democracy? It's democracy on steroids. You get to vote every few months, and I can have so much fun, in this electioneering. But that's it. That's what it is. You know, you deal with the cards you're dealt with, and also you respect the results. Whatever happens, you respect the results.
Prime Minister, Senator Bob Menendez, whose pro-Israeli credentials I don't think can be questioned, recently warned against including in a future ruling coalition Jewish Power Party leader Itamar Ben-Gvir, of course, convicted in the past of supporting a terrorist organization and was exempted from service in the IDF because of his political views. When forming a coalition and trying to get to 61, what are the guardrails that you think of in terms of including people in the government?
Well, the first guardrail is already passed, and that's a decision of the Supreme Court that completely cleared him and allowed him for running in the Knesset and running and being part of the government. There's no problem with that. They've done that. But I asked my friend Bob Menendez, he's really a friend, he's a great friend of Israel. He opposed and still opposes the dangerous Iran deal, so I appreciate him very much. But he raised that question with me. And I asked him a question in return. Jews often do that, you know. You ask a question.
I've noticed, yes.
Well, here's my question in return. I said, Bob, where were you? Where were you for a year and a half when this government, the present government, made a coalition with the Muslim Brotherhood, brought them into the government, the Muslim Brotherhood who refuses to recognize a Jewish state, wants to dismantle it, refused to attack terrorism, but in fact go to the mourning Sukkot, you know, the mourning MOURN rituals for terrorists who died while murdering scores of innocent Israelis. Where are you? They celebrate the terrorism. They call Hezbollah our heroes. They call Nasrallah our leader. They call Hamas our model. These people are in the government. And you had nothing to say about that? That's okay. There's a kind of condescension that says that people who are not to your liking on the Jewish side, well, they have to be opposed. But Arabs, no, they're sort of a lower breed, a lower creed. So they can support Iran, they can support Hamas, they can support Hezbollah, they can support the ending of the Israeli state and Israeli democracy. That's okay. We say nothing. No. And I was very clear about that because I think this is not fair. There is no comparison. If I have to choose between somebody who supports the state of Israel, supports the idea, somebody who wants to destroy the state of Israel and celebrates killer terrorists, that's an easy choice. But I asked for symmetry, and I don't see it. First of all, I don't think it's symmetrical. I think it's asymmetrical. But at least a word on that. Everybody's been silent. They've taken people who support the people who chant death to America, death to Israel. And when we take somebody who supports both, they accuse us. And don't talk about the other side. No. In practical terms, the answer to your question is that I've had parties to my right in the past, the same kind of party. They didn't influence policy. They didn't decide policy. The Likud decides it. And frankly, the prime minister decides it. That's why I'm running for prime minister, among other things.
Prime Minister, in your memoir, you detail the various investigations that you've been subject to over time and offer your defense to each one. And in a revealing section, I think you contemplate why do you feel that the Israeli legal system, the Israeli elite has gone after you so much. And you provide some conventional answers, your different political beliefs, but you write at the end that you also believe that you've been investigated so often, persecuted, because you're a class traitor, a traitor to the elite. Maybe you could expand on that.
Well, I think that, Israel was built as a democracy, but in its early years, it was governed by basically a socialist left elite in every realm. The economy was a controlled economy. The Labor Federation was controlled by the Labor Party. Press, in large part, not completely, was controlled by the Labor Party and the left. And this changed in 1970, This changed when the Likud came to power in the 70s. It changed. And this was seen as an aberration. That is, the elites saw it as sort of a temporary usurpation of their natural right to govern Israel, lead Israel. It's not that they don't respect the results of the elections. Everybody respects the results of elections, but they say, look, this was wrong. So we can correct it. We can correct it by tightening our control on various institutions, by mobilizing the press that we have an inordinate share of influence on. But it didn't help. The Likud kept winning elections. Labor came back, but then I came in. And when I came in, I started winning election after election after election. And what made this particularly unseemly, unacceptable, was that I was seen as some magician. I have a magic wand that I wave over the unwashed, the lower classes. They call them baboons, okay? Such disrespect, it's unbelievable. Somehow I take them to a right-wing position that is inimical to all the standards that the leftist elites want. There's only one problem with that theory. When you had politicians who waved magic wands and they waved them to the left and they said, we'll divide Jerusalem, we'll go back to the 67 boundaries, they were kicked out by this unthinking mob in 2 minutes. In other words, the reason they support me is not because I have a magic wand, it's because I represent what they believe and I believe are core values of Israel, our Jewish traditions, our safe boundaries, our strong security, our united Jerusalem. And I will not adopt the leftist agenda. What's worse is I come, they often say to me, how can you, the son of a world-class historian who was in Israel's elite units, Ashkenazi educated at MIT, the ambassador to the UN, and so on and so on and so on. How can you lead this party? And I said, they imply that they're lower class. And I tell him the story of my great-grandfather who came here in the late 19th century and wanted to build a synagogue for Yemenite Jews. And his Ashkenazi neighbors said, no, you can't do that. And he did. He finally built a synagogue for Sephardi Jews, which still stands today 100 years later, 110 years later. And I'm like him. And when they ask me, how can you do that? I say, well, from my grandfather, great-grandfather, Abraham Marcos, I inherited this view that is not condescending to any of Israel's tribes, to any of my fellow Jews. I find that so abhorrent, so so patriarchal, so patronizing is the word, that I can't accept it. Well, maybe some people can't accept it. They don't accept me. It's their problem. But the majority of the people of Israel do accept me. And they accept me not on the basis of Sephardi, Ashkenazi. It's actually a majority, and sometimes an overwhelming majority when you parse it out to the end, because they think I do best for everyone. Ashkenazim, Sephardi, left. I wouldn't say left, I would say soft left, middle, and right. And that's why in head-to-head races, I'm ahead of other people. So that small elite finds that abhorrent, and they'll just have to get used to it. I hope. We'll see soon.
Prime Minister is going to another rally, so we only have a few moments, but let me ask a few questions from the audience. Michael Blocker asks, what's the best way to strengthen the American-Israeli relationship?
First of all, to make sure that Americans know the truth about Israel. The fact that we've been here, the Jewish people, for 3,500 years. We're not foreign interlopers. We're not the Dutch in Indonesia. We're not the Belgians in the Congo. This is our homeland. This is the land we've been connected to for thousands of years. And Jerusalem has been our capital for 3,000 years. Basic historical truth. Learn them. If you don't know them, I'm sure you do know them, impart them. The second thing is to advocate a strong partnership, because Israel is becoming increasingly an extraordinarily important and valuable ally to the United States. our intelligence, our cyber capabilities, our technology has saved a lot of American lives. People should know that as well. And our partnership is probably the best alliance in the world today. Israel's intelligence, you've heard of the NSA. It's the biggest intelligence agency in the West. The second one, in absolute numbers, is Israel. Israel, it's a tiny country. But the second biggest intelligence gathering operation in the Western world, in the free world. And we share that intelligence with America. So Israel's history, Israel's current contributions to American security, and I would say something else. I would say that what a Southern senator, a prominent senator told me, he said, I'm not going to repeat his accent. I'm not going to mimic him, but he said, shucks. He said, you can put it in Southern drawl. He said, shucks, if we had another Israel in Afghanistan, we wouldn't waste $1 trillion. We'd have a bargain basement deal because we could protect our interest in that part of the Middle East. And it's true, Israel is ranked, I don't know if people know that, but between 2015 and 2020, the University of Pennsylvania has 17,000 opinion leaders in about 20 countries, rate countries as the powerful countries in the world. And Israel, with 0.1% of the world's population, is ranked as the world's 8th power. That is nothing short of amazing. And we are America's partner, America's ally in values and in interest. And I think spread the word, and help us fight Iran, because Iran will threaten America too. Its nuclear missiles, its ballistic intercontinental missiles, tipped with nuclear warheads, would endanger every American city. They chant death to Israel, death to America. Don't let them have the weapons of mass death against any one of us.
Another question from Yedida Bessemir. What would you advise Jewish students in U.S. universities who are afraid to share their Jewish identities and their support of Israel?
Don't be afraid. Stand up to them. Stand up to them. People who respect people who stand up for their rights. People who respect themselves. Nobody will respect you if you don't respect yourself. Stand up to them. As simple as that.
Prime Minister, you've been the longest serving prime minister in Israel, 15 years, longer than Ben-Gurion, 13 years, longer than any other Israeli prime minister, and longer than almost any other head of government in a democratically elected country in the world. Over that span of time, how do you believe your style of leadership has changed?
Oh, it's changed a lot. First of all, I'm a lot more relaxed than I was initially. I was a lot more intense, a lot more concerned with what the hostile press wrote about me or said about me. I couldn't care less with it. Well, you do in a utilitarian sense, but you don't get really offended. I get offended for my family because they attack my family viciously, but personally, I just brush it over. But also, you have, in this sense, alternative media that have sprouted up. They're still small. Social media that have their uses. They also have their abuses. But the useful thing is that a few people can't control information anymore. And by the way, that you asked about Iran, that is the most important thing that we could do to liberalize and liberate Iran. That is to deny the Iranian regime control over the internet. If we can find a way, and there are ways, there are techniques, there is technology to prevent them from doing that, I think that would be the beginning of the end of the regime. So what did I learn? I've become, well, more experienced, less intense, not less intense in the fire inside, but less intense about things that don't matter. You have to separate the wheat from the chaff, the trivial from the important, and you sort of get better at doing that as you go along. That's one of the benefits of being in office more than a couple of years.
Another question from, I hope you don't think of this as nepotism, my son, Matthew Herbst. Should Israel...
Well, I start an immediate investigation about it.
I'm afraid, I hope not.
The Herbst scandal.
Should Israel provide defensive weapons to Ukraine? If not now, what is the line that you would consider as prime minister?
look, the current policy was determined by the present government because the war broke out under their, or this question arose under their stewardship. It's a complicated answer because Israeli aircraft and Russian aircraft daily almost bump into each other in the skies over Syria as we bomb Iran's efforts to implant itself militarily in Syria. So obviously, we don't want a clash between, we don't want a Russo-Israeli war. We don't really want that. So this complicates matters on one side, and there are other complications. We don't always, I didn't agree with Russia on matters. I said, look, let's find an agreement on Syria. But I told Putin many times, I think your policy towards Iran elsewhere is wrong. And it's bad for the world, bad for, even bad for Russia, certainly bad for the Middle East and bad for Israel. We didn't agree on that. The question of supplying the arms, the government has decided so far not to do it. When I get in, I'll take a look at it. I'd like to consult the defense chiefs, our intelligence, maybe other world leaders, and come to a decision.
Prime Minister, I know you have to go on to another rally, so let me ask you one final question. You've been a long time on the world stage, among most interviewed people, among most covered people in the world. What would you like the audience to know about you that hasn't been covered in the press?
Oh, just about everything has not been covered in the press. That's why I wrote this book. And I describe my life growing up in Jerusalem, my forays into the United States that led me to appreciate the tremendous contribution of the United States of America to our freedom and our civilization. But my life as a soldier, as a diplomat, and then as a statesman and a prime minister. And I described the many times that I nearly died, sometimes in combat, nearly drowned in a firefight in the Suez Canal, was shot while rescuing hostages from a hijacked airplane, the loss of my brother, which nearly ended my life when he led the historic rescue of perhaps the most celebrated rescue mission in modern times, as Drew Middleton of the New York Times described it. I didn't think I'd recover from that, but I did. And I focused my life on mobilizing the free world to fight international terrorism more effectively, and also to then from there went into public service as first as finance minister and then as prime minister of Israel for a long time. And I've devoted my life to making sure that Israel is strong enough to secure its future. And I think we've done quite a good job, but there's still a few more things that need to be done. I tell this story in front of the scenes and behind the scenes. My contacts with and discussions, and sometimes turbulent relationship with changing American presidents. You'd be surprised. You'll hear a few things that you didn't hear about. But above all, I think the thing that I describe in my book is that I've lived a life of purpose. My purpose was to secure the Jewish future by securing the Jewish state. But I think that Jews and non-Jews alike who seek a life of purpose may glean some insights from this. At least I hope they do. And read the book and tell me what you think.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, thank you so much for joining us today at American Jewish University's Maven platform. Hope you'll visit us sometime in Los Angeles when you're in the United States.
Say hello to your son. I didn't mean what I said. It was an Israeli press response. Thank you.